All right. Hello and welcome to the Parsha class. Taam, Dagan, and Parshat Teitzei 5785. And just in case you thought we've learned all there is to know about Judaism and food in the previous Parshiot, well, we're in for quite a treat today because there's a lot to say about this week's Parsha as well. I'm going to share my source sheet, which is this Word document right here. Baruch Hashem. And great. All right. So the beginning of the Parsha talks about a very controversial concept of an Eshet Yifat Toar, a beautiful woman who was found in the battlefield, in the heat of war, and the Jewish soldier is allowed to take her, is allowed to marry her. And there's a whole ceremony that he's supposed to go through. The pasuk tells us, "V'ra'ita b'shivya eshet yifat toar." Amongst those captives that were found in war, there's a beautiful woman. V'chashakta ba, and you want her. V'lakachta l'cha l'isha, and then you are allowed to take her for yourself as a wife. The commentaries explain that Hashem in His Torah allows in a limited way what should otherwise be forbidden when a man has trouble controlling himself. Right? This is not the usual Jewish behavior of, oh, she's beautiful, I want her, I'll take her. That's not how we do things. The verse in Tehillim says, man is precious, yet he does not understand. He is like the beasts that perish. And what that means is, although people have an exalted potential, they might sometimes ignore it and be dragged down to the level of beasts, says the Malbim. So we're expected to use our self-control to grow past our animal desires, to elevate our soul. Should be our souls. One moment. Living a life of mitzvah observance should not be stifling, and therefore every action has a permitted alternative, like this. There's even a kosher substitute for all non-kosher foods, like the shibuta fish, which can replace the taste of pig, according to the Gemara in Chulin. Our efforts with fighting the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, are fundamental in our practice of Judaism. For example, one source for the common custom to wait 6 hours between eating meat and dairy comes from the Talmud, where it says that Torah scholars eat every 6 hours, which is more than most other groups of people mentioned there. Presumably, they eat so much later than other people because their lives are dedicated to fighting the Yetzer Hara that wants them to eat earlier. The righteous eat to satisfaction to make sure guests eat well, and the wicked people do the opposite. We skip a few verses down, and we get to another controversial topic in this week's Parsha, and that's the Ben Sorer Umoreh, the rebellious child whose parents basically give him up to be punished by the court for his behavior. The verse says, chapter 21, verse 18, Ki yel ishva, man has Ben Sorer Umoreh, a stubborn and rebellious child. Einenu shomeh, he doesn't listen to him, bekol aviv, uvekol imo, not to the voice of his father, not to the voice of his mother. Gemara tells us it's by the same voice. V'yisru otov v'lo yishmu alehem, and they give him musar, they try to fix him, and he doesn't listen to them. Commentary explains, a Ben Sorer Umoreh is killed for displaying a tremendous amount of gluttony and drunkenness. That's Rashi says. So that's why he is punished. That's what makes him a Ben Sorer Umoreh, is this this drunkenness and this gluttony. All right. The wisest of all men warned us, as Shlomo HaMelech, to stay away from guzzlers of wine and those who eat meat for themselves, because overindulging in the permitted leads to the forbidden. It's very reminiscent of what the Ramban writes in the beginning of Parshat Kedoshim about being kadosh, being holy, by abstaining from mutarlach, or what's allowed to you. A good amount of food is not considered gluttony when it is until it is should be until it is overdone. Should probably know how to spell until it is overdone. On the contrary, eating meat and good food helps one learn Torah. Overindulging is the problem. So there's a quote here from Bill Bryson's The Body. He says, over a lifetime, we eat about 60 tons of food, which is equivalent, notes Carl Zimmer in Microcosm, to eating 60 small cars. In 1950, the average American spent half his weekly income on food. Today, it's just 6%. We live in a paradoxical situation. For centuries, people ate unhealthily out of economic necessity. Now we do it out of choice. We're in a historically extraordinary position that far more people on Earth suffer from obesity than from hunger. In the United States, we are left in a bizarre and paradoxical situation that we are essentially the world's most overfed nation, but also one of its most nutritionally deficient ones. Comparisons with the past are a bit difficult to make because in 1970, Congress canceled the only comprehensive federal nutrition survey ever attempted after the preliminary results proved embarrassing. The Talmud in Eruvin defines glutton using the amount of man we received in the midbar, since that was clearly enough to satisfy everyone. Similarly, the amount of flour that requires the removal of challah is the same as the amount of man that we received daily in the midbar. The amount was an omer, which is a tenth of an ephah. An ephah is 3 se'ah. An omer is tenth of that. It is equivalent to 3/10 of a se'ah. A se'ah has 6 kav. A kav has 4 quarters, each called a rova. A rova is equal to 6 bea or eggs. Therefore, 3 se'ah has 18 kav or 72 rova or 432 bea. A third of a tenth of this, the size of the money we receive daily in the midbar, is then equivalent to 43 and 1/5 bea or 7 and 1/5 rova. Eating this amount of food daily will keep a person healthy. Eating more than this is too much and would label a person as a glutton. Someone who eats less than this is eating too little and can expect to have stomach issues. In several places, the Talmud points out that overeating, otherwise known as achila gasa, or overdrinking for that matter, is not considered eating for the purpose of fulfilling a mitzvah or transgressing a prohibition. This might apply only at the point where a person had stopped eating and continues when there is no longer any enjoyment in the food. Somebody who overate should not even say an after blessing after the food. This concept of overeating has been applied to feeding tubes as well. A more common application involves the eating of the third meal on Shabbat, Sudat Shlishit, especially in the winter when it typically follows soon after the second meal. Would forcing oneself to eat at this point when few are hungry not constitute achila gasa and therefore negate the benefit of eating this meal? Some Rishonim suggest not to eat Sudat Shlishit at all under these circumstances, while others suggest eating a small amount. Ideally, a person should be very careful to plan ahead in order to avoid overeating at the earlier, in other words, the second meal. So be careful how much you eat at the second meal, and then, as the halacha requires, eat your Sudat Shlishit and fulfill your obligation that way. All right, let's keep moving on. The next topic is gonna crack you up. It's an excellent topic. It's about eggs. So, in chapter 22, verse 6, we're told, "Ken yikra ken tzipur kan tzipur lefanav lefanecha b'derech v'chol eitz o al haaretz." So you're walking on the road and you see a nest, a bird's nest on the road, in the tree or on the ground. Efrochim o beitzim, whether they're chicks or whether they're eggs. Va'em rovetzet al efrochim, and the mother is sitting on these young, or al habeitzim, or on the eggs. Lo tikach ha'em al habanim. You cannot take the bird see. The Gemara says, perhaps it is permissible to say so if one recognizes that it is not the absolute reason. In fact, one commentary mentions a total of 3 different possible rationalizations for this mitzvah, including the above, the preservation of the species, and the avoidance of tsar balei chaim, which is cruelty to animals. Some say that when a person does not want to eat the birds or the egg, there's no mitzvah at all. There's no mitzvah at all to send away the mother bird, but would instead constitute an act of cruelty and a possible violation of Tsar Balei Chaim. Others, however, maintain that this mitzvah is a requirement like any other mitzvah and should be performed irrespective of its potential need. Perhaps the fact that sending away the mother bird only applies to a kosher bird, a kosher species of bird, points to the utilitarian requirement of the mitzvah. In other words, this is a sort of a little bit of a chiddush, but since there is a machloket amongst some really big commentaries, I want to approach this a little bit carefully, right? There's a whether or not it's a mitzvah, regardless of what you're going to do with the eggs, seems at least from my limited scope here, it doesn't seem to be much of an argument because it's only a mitzvah for kosher birds. So why do you care if it's kosher unless you're trying to eat them? It would seem like that's at least in my head that seems logical that would be the reason to do this mitzvah. Okay. Like I said, next verse, chapter 22, verse 7 tells us what to do with this situation where you want these birds. Shlach tishlach et ha'em, go send away the mother bird. Et habanim tikach lecha, and lach tikach lach, and the young take for yourself. L'may nitavach, so that things will be good for you. V'arachta yamim, and your days will be long. This verse is the source for the permissibility to eat eggs. People may even buy eggs from anywhere if they recognize what species of kosher bird the eggs come. Only eggs which are round on one side and pointy on the opposite side can be considered kosher. I mean, outside of without a label, I should say, right? Okay. Eggs are parv, and whether eating eggs with milk is kosher is a prime example of an easy question that a student should nevertheless not answer in front of his rebbe, no matter how easy it is. Since fertilized eggs cannot become chicks, their blood spots are much more severe of a kashrut issue than the store-bought fertilized eggs. Blood spots found when checking store-bought eggs require us to throw away the egg. Leaving a peeled egg out overnight is considered dangerous. The sages consider eggs to be the healthiest of foods aside from meat. In the Greek and Roman empires, too, chickens were less valuable than eggs, probably because those societies had not learned efficient methods for domesticating fatter birds. The sages also think the taste of eggs is so delicious, they barely require any improvement or spice. Eating such a healthy food to make Shabbat special may be the root of the custom of eating egg salad on that day. The design of the egg is also worthy of note. The embryo and yolk sac, this is a quote from Avram Katz's Designer World. He writes there, the embryo and the yolk sac are surrounded by a watery fluid, the white of the egg, containing the protein albumin. The main job of this fluid is to supply the embryo with water during its development. Take a close look at an egg. Do you see any holes in it? Look more closely and you will see that on that one end of the egg is blunter than the other. At the blunt end, just under the shell, there's an airspace. The shell has tiny holes running through it, which allow oxygen to diffuse. Sorry. That allows oxygen to diffuse into the airspace from outside. The oxygen is then carried via blood vessels to the embryo, and the carbon dioxide passes out in reverse direction. In this way, the embryo breathes, a breathing egg. It is obvious that the yolk sac must be kept in place that the developing chick can obtain nourishment it requires to survive. What keeps it in place and prevents it from slopping from side to side? The albumin, which twists and densifies like a rope from the two extremes of the egg, holding the yolk firmly and securely in place. Any well-designed capsule in which living creatures develop must take into account the need to produce and store waste. You will not be surprised, therefore, to know that 3 days after having been laid, the fertile hen eggs with its tiny embryo, that fertile hen's egg with its tiny embryo, has an excretory sac attached, in which the developing embryo is able to deposit its nitrogenous waste. Nothing is missing, and everything is in its place. Every mother bird knows, without ever having been taught, that their egg requires a stable inward temperature in order to develop. Most birds satisfy this requirement simply by sitting on the egg, but somehow the mother birds know when the eggs require extra heat. When the air temperature is very low, birds incubate very closely and shiver to keep both themselves and eggs warm. In climates where the air temperature rises above that which is beneficial for the egg, the birds will again incubate very closely to prevent the egg temperatures rising above the body temperature of the mother. The egg has no way of regulating its temperature and relies entirely on its mother, and mother knows exactly what to do. Similarly, the eggs must be turned regularly by the parents to help the chick develop properly. With instinct and devotion, the parents do their job without ever having been taught. Elsewhere, in another book, the author writes, like many other birds, the hen pheasant does not lay all her eggs at once. Instead, she gradually builds up her complete clutch. Pheasants lay up to 20 eggs, one every day or so, but not until she has laid the complete complement does the hen start incubating. This is because the survival of the chicks depends on them all hatching at the same time. Only a day or two after they hatch, the mother leads them away from their nest to look for food. Any little one that has not yet hatched would be unable to follow. So you see, a lot has gone into the thought of the design of the eggs and of the birthing process of birds. And the more we study these things, the more we know about them, the more we'll recognize Hashem's hand in creating this perfect world. Okay, and we go a little bit further, chapter 22, verse 9. Lo tizra karmecha klayim pen tigdash hamleya hazera asher tizra utvuat hakarem. You shall not sow your vineyard with other kinds of seed, lest the fullness of the seed which you have sown be lost together with the increase of the vineyard. As we're not allowed to have mixtures of different kinds of food together with especially grapes. So the commentary explains, it is forbidden to plant mixtures of any other species of vegetable or grain with grape seeds. This, which is similar to what it says in Vayikra chapter 19, verse 19. One may plant as many as 5 different types of vegetables in a 6 tefach garden patch. We spoke about that in a previous class as well. Grapes are unique. And here we have a quote also from Rabbi Avraham Tatz in Designer World, where he talks a little bit about how great and amazing grapes are. This is definitely worthy of attention if you haven't ever thought about the uniqueness of grapes in the past. A person can live on a diet of fresh, well-washed, ripe, and sweet grapes without additional food of any description for several weeks in a state of health than he was before. When you look at a grape, all you see is a rather large berry. There's nothing in its appearance to indicate that it contains a long list of beneficial nutrients, together with enough kindly chemicals to fill a shelf in a chemist's shop. These chemicals are a perfect solvent, and the food must be regarded for what it is, a medicine. They will dissolve all foreign matter in the body without harming healthy tissues. Secondly, the chemicals act as an eliminator. Provided that most of the skins and some of the pips are eaten, constipation is almost impossible. Thirdly, these chemicals are an antiseptic. As the grape chemicals destroy foreign matter in the body, they also heal wounds. Look at the grape. Its nutritive power is due to the presence of sugars in a higher percentage than any other fruit. These sugars, glucose and fructose, are easily assimilated and burned rapidly, giving a speedy source of energy and vitality to exhausted organisms. No less important than the sugar are the therapeutic properties of other components of the grape, which include all the vitamins from A to C: vitamin A, thiamine, riboflavin, vitamin C, B1, B6, B12. Add to this the presence of potassium, sodium, calcium, phosphorus, and iron, besides the beneficial action that the ferments have on the regularity of digestive functions, and you begin to understand what there is to get excited about. It is claimed that the grape is the perfect aid to healing, and certainly one of the purest foods that one can eat, enabling the body gradually to purify and heal through its own automatic mechanism. So pure and perfectly balanced are the chemicals in grapes, it is impossible for the fruit to go bad. This chemical reaction just cannot take place. Instead, it dehydrates and becomes a raisin, which will keep for unlimited periods. It is only when the tough skin is punctured that fermentation takes place and the fruit looks mildewed. The entire world and its fullness are made like a vineyard. What is its redemption? A blessing. Based on the verse, I have said to Hashem, you are my God. I have no good apart from you. Rabbi Chizkiah said in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, who said in the name of Rabbi Abun, who said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, only if you ate and said a blessing, it is as if you ate what you own. Now we're going to skip to the next chapter, chapter 23, verse 5. Just one moment. Just one quick moment. I'm sorry. Just want to make sure everything is copacetic. Okay. I'm sorry. Okay. That's fine. Okay. Good, good. So the nation of Ammon are not allowed to marry into the Jewish people. They're not allowed to convert into the Jewish people. And why? So the verse tells us, chapter 23, verse 5, Al Davar Asher Lo Kadmu Etchem Balechem Umamayim, that they didn't come when we asked them for help as we were traveling through the Midbar on our way to Israel. They did not come with bread and water. Baderech b'tzeitchem in Mitzrayim, as we were leaving Mitzrayim, asher sachar alecha at Bilam ben Beor. They hired instead Bilam ben Beor, miftor aram naharaim kalaleka, so that he would curse us. Of course, that didn't work out. He tried to curse, but every time he opened his mouth, Hashem put a blessing inside. So that never actually happened. But here you have this Bilam is being hired to hurt the Jewish people. So what's worse, hurting the Jewish people or not giving us bread and water? So the verse seems to emphasize bread and water. The first reason mentioned for not allowing the people from the nation of Ammon to become Jewish is that they did not greet the Jewish people with bread and water. This demonstrates the importance of sharing food. Quote from a book called The Four Elements of an Empowered Life, a Jewish book. It says research has shown that both feelings of love as well as physical pleasure activate related areas in our brain, known as pleasure centers, in a section called the striatum. The close relationship between the two shows us that desire for physical pleasure, used correctly, is a powerful tool that leads to love or to enhance existing love. This is why so much of our relationship development happens over food. We go out to eat on dates, bring our families together for dinner, or try to get to know people over coffee. So we naturally know that we want to connect our food to our desires, to our friendships. And here you have this nation of Ammon that lost the opportunity to become the Jewish people because they did not feed us. They did not have that kind of generosity, or they wanted to connect with another group of people in that way. Chapter 23, verse 10. A lot of mitzvot in this week's Parsha. Ki Teitzei machane al oivecha v'nishmarta mikol davar ra. When you go to to war, and you have a war camp, and you do not do anything evil. It says, do not stay away from all evil things. So what does that refer to? Because the Ramban says a Jewish soldier must be warned to stay away from evil, which includes, again, food, and eating disgusting foods in the heat of battle. Now, you may or may not know this, but for instance, probably one of the more famous examples in history, the Japanese, in anticipation for an American attack on the island of Iwo Jima, they basically dug themselves into the caves and underground, and in the process before the battle, even they had to survive. One of the ways they did that was they literally ate whatever they could find, some bugs and whatever else, just to stay alive and to be able to attack the American soldiers when they got onto the island. But that's one of the things we don't want our soldiers to do, to eat these disgusting kinds of foods, even in the heat of battle. Although he's assumed to be completely righteous because he's allowed to eat not kosher. It's an interesting thing. The Jewish soldier in time of battle can go and eat non-kosher food. It can still affect him negatively, and he should try to avoid it, says the Znaim LaTorah. Okay, we go a little bit further, 6 verses later. We have another interesting halacha. Lo tasgir eved. Do not deliver a slave, basically a runaway slave, el adonav, to his master. Asher yinatzel alecha me'im adonav. You should not do that, even if he escaped. If he ran away from his master, you do not send him back. So, like the law of an escaped slave, Rebbe was punished for not protecting a calf on its way to being slaughtered to be eaten. right? We have to protect each other. Obviously, if there's something else beyond the slave's financial reasons for being a slave, if there's some sort of like mistreatment going on, we need to feel for that and try to take care of our fellow man. Chapter 23, verse 25. Next interesting halacha. Ki tavo bekerem re'acha. When you're working in your friend's vineyard, ve'achalta anavim kinafshecha savecha. You can eat as many grapes as you want. Fill yourself up. No problem. El kalyacha lo titain. But don't put it into your vessel. You're not supposed to, and this isn't a take home, doggy bag type situation. You can eat at work as much as you want, but you cannot take the food home. So, like the law of when he's working at his employer's field during the harvest, a worker can eat as much as he desires so long as he is not overeating. And this shows the importance of feeding our workers. This is actually a halacha that is still brought down in Shulchan Aruch nowadays. And it's I think an important aspect of this is that we as employees, we need to be careful about our workers, and as employees, we need to be careful about how much we take away from our bosses, right? If you're working in a restaurant and it's lunchtime, you're obviously allowed to eat. You shouldn't be bringing in food from elsewhere, especially into a kosher restaurant. On the other hand, as the employer, you have to be mindful of the fact that you have workers and they need to be fed. There's a number of catering jobs I've had in the past where the caterer just didn't calculate in the fact that the workers needed to eat as well. There was no time for it. There was no food for it. He calculated very carefully to make sure, that there was enough food for the guests, and didn't really think too much about making sure that there was food for the workers. Very important halacha, and it's brought down in Jewish law as well. It's brought down in non-Jewish law as well. There's a concept of making sure that your employees are able to eat. If you're not allowing them to bring in food, they have to be eating from your stock. Okay. Similar halacha, but somewhat different. Chapter 24, verse 6. Lo yachvol rachaim barachev ki nefesh hu hovel. You should, when you're working, when you've got money, when you have somebody who owes you money, you can't take the mill or the upper millstone for the pledge, or you're taking the man's life. What does that mean? So somebody owes you money, you can't the lender cannot take from the borrower any as collateral anything with which the borrower would use to make food. Again, food is that important. It's our lives. So you can't take away. I need some sort of collateral to make sure you're going to pay me. That doesn't mean you can take the person's blender, or the person's cutting boards, or the person's knives, forks, spoons, whatever it is, whatever they need for food, you cannot take as collateral. That's what that halacha tells us. Right, next interesting halacha, chapter 24, verse 20, tells us the mitzvah of ki lachbod zetecha lo tefire acharecha l'ger liyatom v'la'almana yeh. When you beat your olive tree, in other words, when you're when it's the harvest time for the olive tree. You shall not, you can't go over them, the trees more than once. You beat them, you get the olives off, and then you keep going. You don't try to get every single olive. Why? It shall be for the stranger, for the fatherless, otherwise known as orphan. Fatherless. And for the widow, a corner of a fruit tree must also be left for the poor. You have to leave some of the tree's fruit for the poor to collect. And that's one of the ways that tzedakah and charity was done in ancient Israel. And hopefully will happen again soon. All right, towards the end, chapter 25, verse 4. Lo tachsom shor b'disho. You shall not muzzle the ox while it's working in the field. Grain. Once food is in a completed produced state, it no longer requires being tithed. What's that? So we know we have to give 10% of our food and property to charity every year, or we did in the time of when we had a monarchy in Israel. But from the word disho, the grain, Rashi learns that there's a requirement. There's a requirement to take the maser, the tithes, only when the food is not completed yet, when it's still in the field. The commentary continues: a human worker should also not be muzzled. We're just talking about not muzzling an ox because it needs to eat. But a human worker should also not be muzzled in the sense that he should be allowed to eat while working in the field. This is what we spoke about before, about somebody working in your field, in your in your vineyard. The difference regarding this mitzvah for animals in comparison to people is that the Torah is stricter regarding animals by adding this negative commandment forbidding muzzling. It didn't really say that when it was with regard to people. For this reason, the reason for this, and this is a possible reason for this. I guess it's the Oznaim the Torah. All right, the reason for this, to jump at any food they could get, and do not have the mindset to be patient. Again, this is something we learned in the very first verse of this week's Parsha today, that there's a certain degree of self-control that a human being is required to have. People, on the other hand, are more confident that they will have what to eat eventually. The Torah therefore forbids muzzling an animal to avoid inflicting this added degree of pain. It doesn't know it's going to eat later, so that's how you tell it. In the last verse, not really very much exciting here, but just pointing out, and this is the very end, we talk about the mitzvah of remembering what Amalek did to us, to actively try to forget Amalek. Comes from the last few verses of this week's Parsha. Asher karcha baderet, that they cooled you, or they chanced upon you on the way. V'izane b'chal kol they went after the people who were following behind you. And you were ayef ve'agea. You were ayef, which usually means tired, right? You were tired, and ve'agea, and two different words for tired usually. V'lo yareh Elokim, and you did not fear Hashem. So it just so happens that, according to Rashi, ayef actually doesn't just mean faint or tired. It actually refers to a certain kind of tiredness that comes from being thirsty. In other words, we were dehydrated, as can be seen in a verse in Eov 22:7, which says, might as well look it up now. Am I right? We have time. Um, right. So it says, let's look it up. So it looks like it says, Lo mayim ayef tashke ev timna lochem. You do not give the thirsty water to drink. You deny bread to the hungry. So here, the translation is it's clearly that we're talking about thirst, right? They don't have a lack of water, and that is that's what I have for you for today. I hope you enjoyed the class. Hope you learned some more concepts about food and eating in this week's Parsha. We learned about gluttony. We learned about forbidden mixtures. Or did we? 1 second. 1 second. 1 second. That's not it. We should have also learned about forbidden mixtures, hybrid fruit. We learned about the Ben Sora Remora and gluttony and self control, and the fact that there's always a kosher avenue for our Yetzer Hara. And again, all of these are found the design of the egg or of the grape to be perfect. The rest of the world is just the same. Hashem has everything all planned out, and everything is for the best. We should only see good things in the coming future and in the coming year. Thank you for listening, and have a Shabbat Shalom.